what Ceausescu did to the orphans in Romania, nobody cares. There's no history about it.
Right.
Nobody knows anything about it. And
Right.
look what I went through.
Yeah.
I was in a freaking orphan concentration camp.
Right. So, onto the Mishnah, which is, to make a segue, one of the antidotes to corrupt and horrible societies. Because by having a system in place of laws, of trust, of agreement about how we're going to handle these things and what is right and what is wrong, and no one is above it, but everyone is subject to the same laws, we create a society that can hopefully avoid some of those extremes. If you remember from last week, we were discussing the issues of overcharging and undercharging, which is really considered to be fraud under Jewish law. Remember the distinction in American law: fraud means you were lying, it was deceptive, and therefore it was fraudulent. In Jewish law, fraud means you charged more than it was, even if you were 100% honest. Right? If you said, "Oh yes, this is a pen that's been used, $50," and if you find a sucker to pay $50 for it, under American law, you're fine. But under Jewish law, no, you're not going to jail for that, but you're going to have to either cancel the sale or refund the difference between the fair value and the $50 you charged.
So you cannot be an excellent merchant.
For most things, which leads us to our chapter 4, Mishnah 9, that there are some things that are not subject to this law. There are certain types of transactions that are not bound by this issue of what is the fair price, and it's what the market demands. And that's where we're going to be on now. So we're on chapter 4, Mishnah 9, dealing with things that are exemptions from the laws of fraud, of over or undercharging, or underpaying, I should say. All right, shall we?
These are the things to which the laws of fraud through overcharging do not apply. A, the sale of slaves, debt documents, land, and what belongs to the temple.
All right, so these 4 categories, if someone says, hey, wait a minute, you sold me this land, and I asked a real estate expert and came back, and they told me that it's worth half what you charged me, tough. All right, so Natan, real estate agent, you're okay. Right.
No, but it's interesting also about the land, because you have behind the concept of the land belong to God.
Correct.
So how can they find the balance between, I can play around with selling the land and any price when the land actually is not yours? They borrow to you.
So one of the great things about this translation, as I've mentioned, and we don't usually get time to go through, are the commentary at the bottom by United Synagogue. And this comment on section 1 is excellent, because it shows exactly how the rabbis deduced these 4 things as being not applicable. If you look, there's a stack right there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through it just for the sake of time, right? The laws of fraud through overcharging are learned from Leviticus 25:14, which states, when you sell something to your neighbor or buy from the hand of your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. That's the quote from Leviticus 25:14. Standard halachic midrash break down the words. What is each word in that sentence teaching us as a limit or as an expansion of the law? Well, according to the rabbinic interpretation of this verse, the wrong is fraud from overcharging, ona'ah, as we've talked about before. From the words from the hand, the rabbis learned that in order for a sale to be subject to the laws of fraud through overcharging, it must be something passed from hand to hand. It has to be passable. If it's not movable property, it's not subject to this issue. Therefore, this excludes land and slaves. Slaves were always, as it says, followed laws that were similar to what was used for land. And of course, neither of them can be passed from hand to hand. Right? When you purchase real estate, I don't dig up an acre and hand it to you for your possession. Right? We pass a symbol for the land, but the land itself does not pass hand to hand. The word something, right? Because it says you shall not, when you sell something to your neighbor, excludes documents, because the document itself has no value. Therefore, you're not selling the document, you're selling the contents, and the contents aren't really a thing. Therefore, there's no set value for that. And the word neighbor excludes property which belongs to the temple, because we are all equal in a relationship to each other, but the temple stands beyond us, and therefore those things don't fall under the same issue of overcharging. Now, what belongs to the temple, we're going to get a little bit of a glimpse further on in the Mishnah, so I don't want to go into that right now, of what it means that something belongs to the temple and the laws of overcharging regarding it. But it's just a wonderful example of how one verse, when you read it very carefully, you can see that there are 4 different caveats built into that verse that if you just read it smoothly, you would completely ignore, and then you'd be missing an important part of the halakha. Good? Questions? Help sort out why they make the land exempt? Okay, it's not that they're just picking winners and losers, they got a verse, and that's what the verse seems to imply. Onward.
Number 2, they are not subject to 2-fold restitution, nor 4-fold, nor 5-fold restitution.
All right, so this is something that we saw similar, which is as long as the Mishnah has mentioned these 4 special categories, let's tell you something else about them. All right, so this is now no longer about overcharging. This is about the 4 categories of things that are not subject to overcharging. Does that make sense? All right, it's kind of like stream of consciousness. As long as I've mentioned these 4, let me tell you another important factor about them. Good? Good.
An unpaid guardian does not take an oath on their account that he did not damage them, nor does a paid guardian make compensation if they are lost on his watch.
Right, so normally both of those categories, if I'm an unpaid guardian and your property goes missing, you know, you asked me to look after your smartphone and it disappears, and you didn't pay me, you just asked me to do it. You remember when we looked at that earlier? All I have to do is swear I didn't touch it, and I didn't steal it, and I didn't break it. And as long as I'm willing to swear that, then I'm good. For these special categories, I don't swear. I don't have to swear. It's not subject to that same law. And same too for a paid guardian. These 4 categories are not subject to forcing restitution should something happen on his watch. Good?
What about if someone damaged the land?
Well,
That's borrowing.
Right. Well, borrowers are different than being an unpaid guardian. Right? A borrower has full
No, someone born.
Bomb.
Born and put fire. Okay.
Oh, burn.
Burn.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes.
No, I forgot to turn on my captions. That's okay.
You know, it's funny you say that. When we were at the movie, there was a family in front of us, and I didn't know they did this, but many movies have closed captions in theaters. They have a little device that you put in the cup holder, and it sits up in front of them, and the words are projected on that, and just they can see it, so it doesn't disturb anyone else. And then you have closed captioning and they can see the movie in the theater. It was really impressive.
Closed captioning, you know how the words are, somebody.
You know, for people who are hard of hearing, right?
Oh.
It puts the words at the bottom of the screen, but they're sitting in a movie theater, so they're not going to write the words up on the big screen. So they have a little device that has the words being beamed to it by the theater, and it's very cool. It was very cool. Yeah.
AMC theater?
I have no idea. I just watched the movie. I don't care where I am. So arson. Yes, if you're the one who commits the arson, then you're in trouble. But if you're an unpaid guardian and arson happens, you don't even have to swear that you didn't do it. Right?
What about if you are, they say, a very important document or nothing happened to you?
Yep, that's what we just read. Right? These objects are not subject, and part of the reason why they're not subject is because their value is indeterminate. Right? How do you say what is the value of these things? As we just said, they don't function according to the regular rules. So do I pay you for the parchment, or do I pay you for your life's work that you wrote on that parchment? And if it's your life's work, it may be worth $1 million to you, but was it worth $1 million to anyone else? So yeah, especially if it's gone, who can even look at it now and compare? You know, sorry, I burnt the Mona Lisa, but really, it's not that important a painting, right? I mean, is it really that pretty? Would you have the Mona Lisa hanging in your house? Yeah, it's just some woman. Okay, onward.
Number 3 is Rabbi Shimon says, holy things for which he is responsible are subject to the laws of fraud through overcharging, and holy things for which he is not responsible are not subject to the laws of fraud through overcharging.
All right. Again, excellent commentary here. I can summarize it, I think, but go ahead and read along if you like. So holy things that you are responsible for are subject to the laws of overcharging. This means something along the lines as follows. I dedicate a sheep to the temple, right? I will bring a sheep to the temple. I make a vow. That would be the hypothetical. And the sheep dies. Tough. You vowed to bring a sheep. That sheep dies. You have to replace that sheep, and you do not get to fudge the value of the replacement sheep. Right? So if you pledge a sheep, it's got to be the full price of a sheep, a fair value of the sheep. On the other hand, I dedicate this sheep, and the sheep dies, I'm not responsible, right? Because I specified this sheep was destroyed against my will. I mean, I didn't do anything to it. The sheep got hit by lightning, whatever, by a bus. I only promised to bring this sheep, and with it being gone, I'm not responsible for what happened. So in the case where things I am responsible, a sheep, I'm responsible for a generic sheep, that falls under these laws. But things for which I'm not responsible for replacing this sheep. I'm only responsible for this sheep. Therefore, we don't have to worry about this issue of overcharging because I don't have to compensate at all should something happen to the sheep. See the difference, maybe? All right, so again, as we see in many different circumstances, what you say matters. If you're making a vow to the temple, choose your words carefully, because you will be on the hook for precisely what you say, not necessarily what you meant. Okay, and?
Number 4 is Rabbi Judah says, also one who sells a Torah scroll, an animal, or a pearl is not subject to the laws of fraud through overcharging. All
right, so just on your own, without running to the comments, why might these 3 be not subject?
Maybe it's hard to put a value on those.
Exactly right. Who's to say what a Torah is worth? Right? I mean, isn't the Torah worth infinite or nothing? If someone cares about the Torah, it's worth everything. And if they don't care, it's worth nothing more than the parchment that it's on. And a pearl, I mean, some people, they're desperate for jewels and they'll pay for anything. For the rest of us, that's oyster spit. So who's to say what it's worth? And an animal, right? If my kingdom for a horse, right? In the middle of the battle of Bosworth Field, wasn't it? I'm trying to do my British history, right? Henry the second? No, not the 7th. No, not that. It's one of the earlier Henrys. Said, my kingdom for a horse. He lost his horse during the battle, and because he was unhorsed, he couldn't continue the battle the same way, and that, theoretically was what turned the tide of the battle. And he went and said, my kingdom for a horse. Meaning if someone would give me a horse so I can continue fighting, I would pay them a kingdom just for the horse so I could continue fighting. So for him, right there at that moment, a horse had infinite value. Not so much, right? A horse is a horse, unless of course it's Mr. Ed. Sorry. Once I started saying it, I couldn't stop. However, the sages disagree.
The sages disagree?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see where that is. The sages said to him, they only said these.
Right, meaning the first 4 things we mentioned in the first part of the Mishnah, that's it.
The slaves, the debt documents, the land, and what belongs to the temple?
That's it. Right, meaning we derived these from the verse, and that is what limits. You can't start just using logic to expand the category of things that are exempt from the laws of overcharging. Because yes, you have a good point, Rabbi Yehuda, about these other things and about trying to define their worth and all of the issues of, what's important to one person now, but not another. But the laws only apply to the 4 things, or the laws are only exempt with regards to those 4 things that were derived directly from the verse. And therefore, for an animal, for a pearl, or for a Torah scroll, there is something that the Beit Din can establish as a fair market value, should there be a claim of overcharging.
That's very interesting, because I would have thought that a Torah scroll would belong to the temple, but I guess that's not what they were doing in the temple. It was more.
No, Torah scroll belongs to us.
Synagogue. Oh, belongs to us.
Right, to the individual owner. I mean, the idea that an individual would have a Torah would also be, ideal. Not that everybody could.
Well, like the king had his own.
The king had to write his own.
Yes.
So that's one way to get it. But
That's right.
but again, what they're saying is that logic cannot be used to expand the category of things that are not subject to a mitzvah that the Torah gave us, which is do not wrong each other in these transactions. The only thing that can exempt something from that mitzvah is the Torah itself, through its precise language.
But Rabbi Yehuda did use one of the 13 characteristics to explain and to understand the Torah. He acted correctly. Because we use his tool also as one of the 13 that is fine with all the rabbis.
So which tool did he use here?
I can't remember.
Well, give an example. How would you describe it? I know it's in Lev Shalem. It's nice. They have the actual list. I know.
No, Lev Shalem was in the book of that you stole that someone stole you or you lost the blue one, the 3 books.
The halacha, right,
Yeah.
right. Alone, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Alone. No, yes, alone.
So in any case, the idea that you can use one of the 13 hermeneutical principles to derive is certainly plausible, but the rabbis had a principle that if it hadn't already been derived, and funny, we talked about this during the lunchtime class, that you don't get to create new ones. That if you didn't have a tradition of using it to make certain rulings, you didn't get to use it later to invent new rulings based on your reading. So although those are rules, they're not rules that get to be used by everyone whenever they feel like it, no matter how airtight you think your argument is. And so in this particular case, the rule of close reading brought us these 4 exemptions and no others. Therefore, even if his are plausible, they are not included in that understanding. All right, onward.
Mishnah 10.
All right, now comes something that sounds different, but is the same.
Just as the laws of fraud apply to buying and selling, so do they apply to the spoken word.
All right, so you have ona'ah b'mamon, you have this defrauding with money, and also b'devarim, with words. What do you mean? How can you overcharge? How do you defraud with words? And we're not talking about straight up lying. That is a whole separate mitzvah. Well, let's have some examples.
One may not say, how much is this object, if he does not wish to buy it.
No, we call that shopping.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, isn't that what people do as a hobby? You just go around shopping?
Yeah.
You're not planning to buy anything. You just like looking. So what's the problem?
You are wasting the time of the seller.
You're wasting the time of the seller. Why? Because you are giving an impression of something being more valuable, the interaction being more valuable than it actually is.
And preventing him maybe to sell and product to someone else. So in some way, damage his income from himself.
Potentially, but I want to make it clear that even if he weren't damaged, right? Let's imagine you are the only person in the store, and it's right during the middle of business hours. So it's not like you're keeping him late from going home with his family or something. And you walk in just because you like window shopping. And you walk in and you say, oh, that's a really nice watch. And how much is it? Oh, that's amazing. Where was it made? And all the while in your mind, there is 0 chance of you buying the watch. Not 1%, 0%. What? For whatever reason, it's a Rolex, it's ugly, your wife won't let you buy any more watches, whatever it might be, it's 0 possibility of you buying the watch. If it's 1%, and an honest 1%, then it's okay. But if it's 0, then you are defrauding him. You are making him feel that he is investing for something more valuable than it actually is, which is a potential sale. And even if there's no other loss to him, except the time, which, he doesn't know what you're thinking. So he's not even going to have his feelings hurt, because sometimes you make the sale, sometimes you don't. You have still broken this commandment. Makes sense? This became a really big issue a few years ago, and it's still a big issue, but it became more famous within the secular world when internet sales became more common. And there became a problem of what was known as showcasing or showrooming, which would be, let's imagine you wanted to buy a new camera. And so you would go down to Best Buy or to Target.
Happened to my father-in-law.
Find out
He
what-
used to work in Ritz camera.
Perfect.
Someone
Yep.
came there and said, "Oh, can you show me the new camera?"
Mhm.
And he spent like 30 minutes
Right.
explaining everything, and the person asking 1,000 questions, and
Right.
they live by commission. Okay, and then oh no, thank you so much, but no, I don't want to buy. Just I wanted to order in Amazon internet, and I want to be sure about all these details.
Yeah, sure.
Thank
So-
you so much. You were
Very
very
helpful.
knowledge. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not a library. I'm a store.
Yeah.
Right? If you want knowledge, go to the library.
So happened.
Of course it happened. And many small stores, I mean, like Ritz Camera and specialty stores have been destroyed by this.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
people who have the knowledge, local knowledge, they need to charge more because they have a building and they have inventory and they don't have all the economies of scale that something like Amazon has.
Now, don't tell me, Rabbi, that you don't go sometimes to Barnes and Nobles, check some books and order through the public library.
No, I don't do what you're describing. Sometimes I will go to Barnes and Noble and I'll be looking, I'll see a book and I'll say, that's an interesting book. And then I will decide whether or not I want to buy the book or whether I want to find it somewhere else. But that's different than saying, I'm interested in this book. Let me look at Barnes and Noble first, and then I'll get it somewhere else. That's where you have the intention of buying it from somewhere else before you walk in the store. And that I don't do. I won't walk into a store.
Public library.
What? Or going to
Amazon.
going to a library, exactly. But-
Because a lot of people, they go to Barnes and Nobles and they'll order it from Amazon to get a cheaper price.
Right.
Amazon's like huge.
Of course, yeah, and
I would-
No, but he's saying
Don't say
library.
Well,
I'm saying Amazon.
Well,
online.
both, in this particular case, are stepping across a line of what it means, especially here we're seeing as a consumer, of what it means to be fair to the business that you're using for yourself in a way that is defrauding them. That is you are taking from them.
I didn't know it was against the law.
Well, that's why we have the Mishnah, to make sure we know, because otherwise a lot of people would miss this. And indeed, you watch people, and many people do.
And actually, this problem happened also. I saw in an article, I think 1 year, 2 years ago. When was that the Borders went in bankruptcy?
Oh, that was like 4 years ago now. Yeah,
Already 4.
yeah.
And they spoke about that if they disappear all these bookstores, the people will not buy in internet so much books, because usually people like to see
Right.
inside the book before buying.
I know. I mean, have you ever tried to browse Amazon?
Yeah,
I mean, okay,
bought
Jewish
everything on
books.
Amazon and stuff.
I'm going to look through all of these to find something good, and I can't always open them up. Sometimes they have the look inside, but most of the time they don't.
Yeah.
And exactly right.
About that, I
You know,
remember.
most of the, spur of the moment books I buy, I think you'll back me up on this, Penelope, are when we walk into a bookstore. And, I pull from the Judaica selection, and they've got nothing in terms of the number of books compared to Amazon. But when I see the book and I get interested in the book, now I'm not going to, now I want it. And then I'll buy it. Unless I can't afford it, but which with books, we usually make exceptions. We like having books.
Why is it, like, I understand you're saying that's fraudulent,
Mhm.
but I still don't understand why, because you're not stealing.
You are what? Well, whether you
Time.
right, whether you are or not, you are creating, and the other examples are going to make this clearer. You are creating a false impression in the other person. You are creating a false relationship, and it's not exactly lying, which is why it needs its own explanation. And it's not exactly stealing, which is why it needs its own explanation. And it's not exactly cheating, but it is definitely stepping across the line of how you are using another person for something, and you are creating the wrong feeling in them. And that is, well, let's look at the other examples and we'll see what the common thread is. Because this first example, I think is really easy to see it as being a question of harm or of stealing. But in terms of the impression you're making and the falseness of it, we'll see that as clearer in the other examples. So let's try part B.
If someone has repented, another should not say to him, remember your earlier deeds.
Right, now this is meant, and the Talmud makes this clearer when it goes into this section. This is meant as a compliment, right? It'd be like me saying to Harriet over here, remember when you used to like get drunk and pick fights in the bar? Oh, you are such a mensch now,
Oh, yeah.
right? You have come so far.
Backhanded compliment.
It's exactly a backhanded compliment, and that's a way to think of it,
Yeah.
right? It gives the impression of a compliment, but there is a dig in the process. And even if it wasn't intended as such, even if I was legitimately just trying to praise you for how much you turned your life around. I mean, you used to be a total wreck. Even if I'm trying to praise you, we can see that it creates a false impression.
This example was
Right.
the mother of Raymond. Remember the show?
Oh, everybody loves Raymond, yeah.
Yeah, his mom was a specialist on this kind of comments.
Yes, exactly. She is a perfect example. And then we're going to get a parallel in the next one.
If someone has descended from converts, another should not say to him, remember the deeds of your ancestors.
Right? Such an amazing thing here. You used to be, your family, they used to worship idols and they used to do human sacrifices, but you have come under the wings of the Torah. It is a miracle. It is wonderful to see how far someone can rise from the slime of pagans to become part of our people.
But in Pesach we say our ancestors were worshipped.
Whose?
Ours.
Whose ancestors?
Okay,
Ours. Ours,
I'll
exactly.
try to find a contact.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, right? You're creating a relationship that is based on a misrepresentation of what you are and what you believe and what you feel, and that falseness to it is what's being problem here. And again, notice these aren't lies, right? I never said I wanted to buy it. I never said you were still a bad person. I never said you were a pagan idol worshiping, slime. I just said other people were, and they were, right? And you were a bad person in the past, and it's I just asked how much it was. There was no lying, no, but there is a falseness to this, and that's the issue that's being described here. And then they're going to give a proof text for this,
Which comes from Exodus chapter 22, which says, and a stranger you shall not wrong or oppress.
right? So why the redundancy of both wronging and oppressing? Because wronging would be directly and an actual case of abuse or taking advantage, and oppressing is b'devarim, is being done with words. Something that is below the radar of obvious harm, but is nevertheless still prohibited by the Torah.
It's not connected to this parsha, to this week, with Yehuda and Tamar. She didn't want to embarrass him in public,
Right.
and is this yours? So nobody will know that he's the father of the
Hakerna, recognize this, please.
Recognize
And
this.
that's the beautiful part also, because it's a parallel to what Judah said to Jacob when he showed him the ketonet, the robe, the coat of many colors. So Judah gets stung by the same words that he used to sting his father. It's midah keneged midah. It's such beautiful poetry. But it's exactly right. And indeed, Tamar is held up as an example of somebody who, because the phrase that he's using in the Talmud is somebody who should rather they were thrown into a fiery furnace than embarrass someone else in public. Right? Better I should suffer than I would embarrass someone in public. And Tamar was willing to be thrown into fire rather than say, Judah's the guy, he's the father, he's the bad guy. No, she let him make that decision. And thankfully he made the right decision and it got all resolved and it's nice. And that created the line of kings that eventually led to David and eventually will lead to the Mashiach. So it's kind of yay, yay for good people. But that relationship is indeed there. All right, let's continue because I really, really want to finish chapter 4 tonight. Because chapter 5, I'd like to begin next week, because chapter 5, we begin with questions of loans and interests and taking interest in all of that, which is very, very important and very often overlooked in Jewish law for a whole variety of reasons, which we'll talk about next week. All right, so we are on Mishnah 11. We are back into business. We're back in the marketplace. So now we're back to straight up issues of fraud or deception in business practices. But now it's not just about the price, it's about the product.
So the first part is produce may not be mixed with other produce, even new produce with new produce, and needless to say, new produce with old produce.
All right, I bet you can even imagine what's the issue here.
But we mix things today in Israel. There's a lot of different in agriculture that we mix fruits in order to create a new fruit.
No. Marketplace.
Market.
You're in the shuk,
In the shuk.
right?
Put the old lemons in with the new
Yeah,
lemons.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, and this is both for positive or negative. So sometimes older things were better, and sometimes newer things were better. But the basic question is, you keep the produce that has value A together with the produce that has value A, and produce that has value B, you keep it with produce that has value B. You don't mix the two together and then make an average price, because that is misleading. Because someone will look at the container and they will assume that it is one or the other, and now you've already deceived someone in the purchase. And that's going to get in the next as well. Sorry, there's a little caveat to that.
In truth, they permitted sharp wine to be mixed with weak wine, since this improves the taste.
Right, so if it's for the normal way that you benefit and improve a particular product, in this case, taking one vintage with another vintage and mixing them in order to mellow the taste, that's okay. But that's because that's normal practice for wine. It's not normal practice to take last week's lemons and this week's lemons and stick them in the same sack and try to sell them all as the same product.
Was made those coins, like one with a lower percent
of purity of the metal, right?
You mix with someone that has higher in order to between both create a better one.
So hybridization, right? If you're deliberately trying to create a new product by mixing things together. So I want to make carrot pineapple juice, right? Because I think carrot pineapple juice is better than carrot juice and better than pineapple juice, no problem. But if you make pineapple juice and you put lots of water in it, and you tell people it's pineapple juice, and you don't mention the water, we got a problem. Or as you'll see in many products, go to the fruit is fruit juice is a really good example of this. Go to the fruit juice aisle in your supermarket and find cranberry juice. Pick it up, look at the ingredients. Cranberries are not number one. Like pear juice is often number one, or grape juice sometimes, or other things. Why? Because cranberries are really expensive. They're hard to grow and hard to harvest, and the people who do, deserve to be compensated. And that means that 100% cranberry juice is very rare. It's very hard to find 100% cranberry juice, and most juices like that. Most grape juices are not 100% grape juice. Most fruit juices will have big pictures, like when they have mixed. There'll be big pictures on the fronts of grapes and apples and other exotic things. You look on the back, it's like 80% pear, and that is a problem for Jewish law. Now, yes, the ingredients are there, so okay, fine. The buyer should be able to get the full information. But when the picture on the front doesn't have the main product, or when it's being called some other fruit, even though the main liquid is completely different, that, in my opinion, would be problematic under Jewish law. So, part 2.
Wine lees may not be mixed with wine, but the seller may give the buyer the lees that come from the same wine.
All right. Anyone here ever try to make their own wine? Or had wine that their neighbor made or something?
My grandmother every year for Pesach.
She made her own wine.
Yes.
Beautiful. And you know
very sweet was spicy.
That's because it's your grandmother. But I don't know when she was preparing it, whether or not you noticed. There are bits in the wine. Those are the lees. We also call them the dregs in English. It's the extra little bits, and they sink to the bottom eventually. And the question here is, so
3 months under the sun.
Well,
in the balcony.
So here's the question. I have my my keg of wine that I'm trying to sell to you. If I add lees more than came with the wine to the bottom, then I just saved this much wine that I'm selling you. right? I'm selling you, let's call this 100 gallons because you're really thirsty.
But we spoke about that before 2 weeks ago.
And let's call this, 2 gallons worth of lees. If I add, it's prohibited, right? If I add lees to the keg, if I deliberately put more at the bottom, then you think you're getting 100 gallons, which has, let's say the average gallon, let's say the average 100 gallons has 1 gallon of lees. You think you're going to get about 1 gallon of lees, but instead you end up with 2. I have defrauded you because you didn't purchase what you thought you purchased. On the other hand, if this wine just happens to have more, okay, that's fine. You just, that's just happened. So you don't have to remove the lees and sell a pure 100 gallons worth of wine, but you also don't get to pad the bottom with lees in order to make your wine go further. Make sense? Okay, keep going.
One whose wine has been mixed with water may not sell it in a store unless he informs the buyer.
Okay, let's make sure we got that. I think we talked about this before, about mixing wine. Yes, when, like I said, at Pesach. No.
Yeah.
That was my YouTube on Pesach with Jason in Ireland. Sorry, too many things, too many classes. So in the old days, meaning days of the Mishnah, you would get your wine, you'd put it in a glass, you would add water, you'd mix it, you'd drink it. You didn't have wine straight usually.
It was like concentrate.
Right, concentrate, almost like a syrup. Usually it would be stronger than you would like if you just poured it straight from your keg, and you would mix it. So, and in fact, when you read through the original Mishnahs about Psachim, they talk about mixing a cup, not about pouring a cup for each step of the Seder. The question then becomes, let's say I'm selling wine. If I take my wine and I mix it with water, so it's 50-50, is that allowed? Yes, if you tell everybody. I have mixed, the wine comes pre-mixed. That's okay. However, that's me selling in my shop to the customer, right? That's retail. There's a problem when you go wholesale.
But one whose wine has been mixed with water may not sell it to a merchant, even if he has informed the merchant, since the merchant would buy it only to deceive with it.
Right, so I have to be concerned as a merchant when I sell mixed wine as a wholesaler to another merchant who I know will then go and sell it to someone else at retail. I have to be worried that he's going to resell it and not tell the person that this was mixed with wine. And therefore, I would be an accessory to deception. So even though I'm not the one who is doing it, I know that this is an issue. It's the same way that if you believe that somebody is trying to sell you stolen property, you don't buy it. Even though you're not a thief, even though you don't know it's stolen property, even if the person has some reasonable story for why they're selling it to you for $50. If you believe that it is stolen, you shouldn't buy it, because by doing so, you are only encouraging the thief to do more or other thieves to do more, even if you're innocent of directly causing the problem. And so too here, you have a responsibility for the supply chain, not just for your own shop. However,
in a place where they are accustomed to put water in wine, they may do so.
Unless that's the local custom. If everybody sells water or watered down wine already and everybody knows it and that's just standard practice, go ahead, that's okay. It's not deceptive because that's just normal. But local custom can clarify some of these issues, but if it's not local custom, you don't get to say, now including water, because people don't know what that means exactly, and there's a chance for them to be deceived. Okay. Mishnah 12. This is the end of chapter 4. Ready? Yeah.
A merchant may buy from 5 threshing floors and put the produce into a storage chamber, or from 5 wine presses and put it into 1 jug, as long as he doesn't intend to mix them for purposes of fraud.
Okay, so you're collecting in general, and you're not intending to portray all of this produce as coming from field A, which everybody knows makes the best grapes or makes the best oranges, or from vineyard, or from wine press B, which everybody knows has the best wine. You're just buying it and you're grouping it because that's the easiest way to store it, and you will sell it at a fair price for what it becomes. Going back to your question of, can you mix some things if that's what you're going to sell it? That's okay. If you intend, on the other hand, to tell everybody, oh, it comes from field A, and everyone goes, all of this from field A for this price, that's great, then you got a problem. And the same thing for the wine press. So again, the rabbis are trying to say that there are ways to mix and allow things to blend and do all of these things, but you have to be extremely careful that you're doing it in a way that is 100% transparent, honest, and not defrauding people.
Rabbi Judah says, a storekeeper should not distribute parched corn or nuts to children, for that accustoms them to come only to him. All
right, parched corn, nuts. Corn, by the way, is grain. They didn't have corn like in American English we call it corn. So why not? What's the problem?
It's like shochad. How do you say shochad in English?
Right.
Yeah, bribe. Yeah.
Right. So you're bribing the kids.
Yeah, but the kids aren't the merchants. I mean, the kids aren't the buyers.
But they will become to be buyers in another 5-10 years. They will remember, oh, this is the best place.
Or they will drag their parents along. Mommy, let's go to this store.
But this is
I like this candy over here.
This is marketing to the ads to the TV.
Okay, right. So this then becomes the question. He doesn't think this is fair. He thinks that if you allow them to do these extra commercial activities that are not targeting the actual product. I'm not telling you how great my product is.
He doesn't try to
cheat
or try
trick.
To see something different than what is it. That this is the situation. Yeah. That's it.
And that is why part A,
the sages permitted.
That's why the other Chachamim say, no, it's okay. You know, it's, and there's even a, it's even an issue in the Talmud where they say, look, if the other people want to give away parched things, they can do that too, right? This is fair competition. And it's no different than painting your shop a bright color or making your shop look prettier.
It's not changing the product.
And it's not deceiving people about the quality of the product and the appropriate price of the produce. And remember also, this is all built around the stuff we began chapter 4 with, which is if you buy something, you've got a time to find the real price, and then you can come back and make a claim if you were deceived. So because you have that easy refund policy, a little around the edges is not such a big problem. You know, a little advertising, a little bling, that's okay.
And then I believe Rabbi Judah says he may not lower the price.
More than what is normal is what he's saying, right? If the normal price is X, he can't just cut the price in half.
Right.
Well, you know, it's unfair.
That's right.
Well, I'm sorry, wait. Hold on,
Hold
wait a minute. When China dumps products here that are below their actual cost in order to drive American manufacturers out of business and create a monopoly or create their own system, don't we say take them to the World Trade Court? And don't we say this is inappropriate? Our trade deals do not allow this sort of thing. When Airbus was receiving subsidies that for their manufacturing, Boeing said, well, wait a minute, that's not fair. They're competing on bids for airliners, and they get government subsidies, and we don't, not directly. This is not a fair level playing field.
Yeah.
So for someone who deliberately lowers the price in a way that is disruptive or damaging to their competitors, Rabbi Yehuda was upset and was worried that this was an unfair marketing strategy. However,
the sages say, let him be remembered for good if he lowers the price.
Hey, lower prices. We're all happy with lower prices. Walmart indeed, right? Walmart indeed, or when we outsource manufacturing to places with lower labor costs or lower manufacturing costs, the prices go down. And indeed, in a smooth and fair global economy, it should work out, right? If I have to pay less for my food because it's being grown in some other country, or if I'm paying less for my toys because they're being manufactured in some other country with lower labor costs, then I should have more money for other products and other services.
That's the theory of Ricardo.
Exactly. Within my own local economy, and that shouldn't be a problem. So people may not be manufacturing toys anymore.
Actually, will manufacture what is they have more advantage.
Exactly, and that's
Economy 101.
and that's what the rabbis are saying.
That's interesting because when you think of the Walmarts and stuff, I think of all those mom and pop hardware stores and grocery stores that were completely put out of business by the lower prices because they couldn't afford to run their stores
Right.
so low.
That's how
They gone.
in small
Right.
cities, small towns.
Yeah,
But the people who had to pay $30 for a
More.
hammer at mom and pop store,
that's right.
they're now paying $5 for a hammer at Walmart. They have $25 more to spend in other parts of the economy within their town.
That's right.
And so maybe they're at the diner, maybe they're at a show, maybe they're doing something else. So not every store is going to survive this disruption.
Right.
But if people are still willing to work, they should be able to find something else to do that they can get the rest of that $25 that's now free from the hammer that was originally only going to mom and pop. At least that's the theory. The problem is a lot of people fiddle with the economies and then you end up sometimes disrupting but not replacing. And that becomes a bigger issue, but we're not here to discuss politics. We're here to discuss Mishnah.
He may not sift crushed beans, according to Abba Shaul.
All right. So again, I don't know, how many people here actually buy produce, like loose produce anymore?
Huh.
You know, in those stores like Whole
Yeah.
Foods where they have the big bins full of
Yeah.
beans or nuts or
Yeah.
things,
Oh,
and
I
you get the big-
It's the most common.
exactly, you get a big
Peanuts,
scoop.
Carinim, everything.
Right, they're not always in plastic bags.
Yeah.
They're like in a barrel. Right?
Fine.
Exactly. Well, so here's the issue.
Whole Food has that.
In Uruguay, see cars also, you can buy one.
So
Generally,
let's take peanuts for example, because it's easy to imagine. So imagine you've got peanuts and they've been, or not peanuts, what do they call them? Pistachio, even better, right? Because pistachios often have the shell partly open, and sometimes the shell is completely open. I have a big barrel of pistachio nuts. What Abba Shaul is saying here is that I can't take my strainer and go through the first level, shake it, and throw out all the bad stuff and leave only the pure pistachios in the barrel.
You as the shopkeeper or me as the customer?
You as the shopkeeper.
The shopkeeper
Because-
cannot do that.
What happens, forget this isn't wine anymore. This is now pistachios. It's my generic barrel. What he's talking about is if you take and you sift the top, it gives an impression that the whole barrel has been sifted.
What do you mean sift?
All the bad stuff removed, all the extra shells, right? So it's like when you buy it, you're buying it by the weight. Well, some of the weight is the actual nut, and some of the weight is the shell. So if I'm buying it and I think it's all been sifted, then I'm going to say, oh, well, it's $10 a pound. That's because it's all nut, and I'm not wasting any money on shell. But I've only created the impression that it's been sifted and cleaned. As a matter of fact, a lot of it is still nut. It's still shell, and that's tricking you to pay more than what you're actually getting. The quality isn't right.
Because what you're buying is the whole barrel. You're not just taking a few from the top and buying them. If you're buying the whole barrel, you think the whole barrel is good stuff, but it's only good on the top layer. And that's
But
That makes sense.
okay.
Yeah, that's called scam, but
But they agree that he should not sift them only at the entry of the storage chamber, since he would be a deceiver of the eye.
right, so it gives that false impression. And then finally, very, very important final Mishnah at the bottom, one that creates a lot of problems.
He should not beautify what he sells, whether humans, cattle, or utensils.
Okay, so imagine you're selling a cow, and it's an old cow, and it's a sick cow. You don't get to go around it with like shoe polish and blacken the hooves, and maybe you can get some paint and get rid of all the gray hairs on its face, and maybe you can feed it so it gets a little fatter just for today, and then you're going to sell it and run away. Not allowed. Or utensils, right? Let's say you've got some old tin fork and you want to just polish that up so that it's the most beautiful tin fork ever, and in fact someone looking at it might think it was stainless steel, because for today it looks good. By tomorrow it's going to be old and nasty and tin again, or even in a week or a month. Anything that actually beautifies it to the point that it will deceive the buyer as to its true quality is prohibited. that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, I like the example that they give at the bottom. The modern example will be to put wallpaper over the walls of a house in order to hide the fact that they are in truth rotting away.
Yes. Truth in real estate is, I think we know, a very important thing. Same thing with truth when buying a car. There are ways that you can make a car seem good for a test drive, that used car type thing. And then you can get the sale and, hey, sorry, you're stuck with it. And this is saying, no, you're not. That is deceptive and against Jewish law. So you can see the laws for buying and selling are extremely rigorous in the Torah and according to the rabbinic interpretation. And that's one of the hallmarks of what it is to be a good Jewish person. I know people often focus on Shabbos and holidays and kashrut and things like that. And of course, those are important too. But if you keep kosher, but you cheat your customers, you have no business calling yourself a pious Jew. If you keep Shabbos, but you are deceptive in your finances, you have no business calling yourself a pious Jew. This is every bit as important, and in some cases more important, because it's not just between yourself and God. This is between yourself, God, and the person you're wronging. And that's going to come back more when we get to the next chapter, chapter 5, and we start talking about making loans to people and collecting interest, or how you avoid collecting interest, because interest is prohibited by the Torah. Okay, everyone have a wonderful Hanukkah, and see you next Wednesday.